mean, I guess technically we don't make any decisions, so. No, anyways. Call to order the meeting of the Verona Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022 at 5:31 PM. We'll begin with the roll.
Alderperson Cronin.
Present.
Alderperson Hoaxt.
Present.
Alderperson Posey.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie.
Here.
Alderperson Touche.
Here I am.
Alderperson Kimmett.
All right, we'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes from the November 8th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Questions, comments, or corrections? Or motions to approve? Motion by Alder Touche. Is there a second? Second by Alder Cronin. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. We'll move on to item 5, which is presentation of the proposed 2023 city budget. Mr. Sayer.
Thank
and
you.
Mr. Lambers.
Andy, you can turn my computer on. So I kind of made this comment before we started the meeting. Ideally, if we can get out of here by 6:15, my kid has a choir concert at 6:30 at Badger Ridge. I'd be very, all right, I'm game. Let's go then. So tonight's the budget presentation. This is very similar to past years. We'll kind of go through it. If you have any questions, just stop me kind of as I go through it. The city continues to grow. I think we're all familiar with that. And there were some comments about traffic coming here tonight. We have almost 15,000 people as of January 1st of 2022. We anticipate that number to continue to rise with all the growth and development that is occurring in the city. Along with that, the city's equalized value continues to grow. Currently, we have an equalized value of approximately $3.5 billion with a B dollars. We've had steady growth in equalized value that shows that our tax base is growing and we are a healthy community. Once again, just another graph of looking at the percentage changes in kind of the non-TID equalized value. Net new construction, that's a key number for us as part of the budget process, as part of the state levy limits. We are capped at our net new construction. For 2022, we had a net new construction of 2.51%. That's about average of most communities. It actually might be a little bit above average of other communities, but there's some very large spikes in there that you see in the past years. That was due to the epic growth and the epic development on their campus. That is not normal. A increase of 1.5 to 2.5, I'd say that's more normal and typical of most communities throughout the state. But that new construction is a contributing factor as we look at what ability we have to make changes in the budget from year to year, because we are capped by that number. So kind of looking at the budget here, we do meet the municipal levy limit of just over $15 million. That does include the approximately $71,000 EMS levy limit adjustment that we talked about, I think, at a couple meetings ago at the council. Net new construction did increase our values by 2.51%. We are maintaining our level of service. We're supporting parks as part of this budget as well. We're funding most of the capital requests from departments, and then we also continue to put money into our equipment and facility replacement funds. So we have an equipment fund for both park and rec, for parks and public works, and then we have an equipment fund also for police and fire. We use those funds as savings accounts so we can then, when they need new pieces of equipment or vehicles, we draw on those accounts so we don't have to borrow for that. We have the same type of funds also for our facilities. So there's 2 boilers downstairs. Those boilers in this building are on their last leg. When those decide they're going to stop working in the next, hopefully 10 years, not 5 years, we'll draw on that account, and it's already been allocated, so we don't have to go out and borrow for that money. Like I said, it's a savings account that we use to hopefully avoid taking on additional debt. So we are reducing debt as part of the 23 budget. We're using $650,000 of fund balance to fund the city street sidewalk program. We're still funding public safety, EMS, and public works through levy. We're going to fund the facility replacement program through levy as well. And we're also adding additional levy for capital. That was one of the priorities we had as part of this budget. We've cut capital significantly over the years. And this year the intent was to try to use more levy towards that capital to build that up to more of a better and manageable area, because we have been cutting that over the years. The budget does provide a 3% cost of living across the board to all non-represented employees. It does add staffing for both the fire department and the senior center, and it contains minimum debt. Our focus again this year was to reduce our borrowing as much as we can, and we also meet the minimum funding for the library. Now the budget did have pressures as well. Some of those pressures include, we had a $71,000 increase for the Fitch Runner EMS levy. We have the minimum funding for the library as well. Both EMS and the library are based upon equalized value to the city, so those are numbers right out of the gate, that's what we have to fund based upon those numbers that are coming in. So EMS is with both Fitchburg and the town as well. As part of that agreement is based upon the city's equalized value. So we continue to have that large growth in equalized value. For better or for worse, we're kind of paying for that as part of those agreements that we have in place. Health insurance, our rates went up by 5%. That is, I think, a little bit higher than the past couple of years, but once again, that's not atypical. We also did have some health insurance changes for city employees that went from single to family. A typical family plan in the city costs the city about $21,000 for each family plan. Single plans are about $11,000, $12,000. So not cheap, but it is one of the few perks that we can kind of offer that employees do appreciate, because it is a nice health insurance plan. We did have an increase in capital requests as well. We tried to fund those as much as possible. Our interest revenue, which we've been talking about with the Finance Committee, that still remains down. I forget what the exact number is, but it's still down. And then our room tax revenue, as of putting this presentation together, was still not back to normal. It's getting closer to being back to normal, but we're still concerned about this winter because Epic is still not back to their normal training schedule. So we had some very good numbers for third quarter of this year, but we're concerned the winter again might see a dip compared to what we saw previously before COVID. So this is just kind of backing into the levy limit. If everyone's curious, it shows kind of how our levy limit is calculated. It's based upon all these numbers here, but we looked at a total increase of $658,000. If we go above that, we'd have to take a debt adjustment as part of the process. So let me just adjust this. So this kind of breakdown from each kind of department and area of just the percent change. Just to point out, I guess, a few of these. One of the big ones as part of the budget process was a drop of about $280,000 in debt payments. That's why reducing debt is so important. That was a nice kind of thing that happened as part of this process. But once again, as part of that, we did put as much as we could back into that capital replacement. So that's why you see a 53% jump. Once again, we have been cutting that for the last couple budgets. I don't say cutting it, but we've cut it before just to help us on the operating side, and we took this as an opportunity to try to build that back up. There's also an increase in the fire department as well as 12.75% due to the new position. So kind of looking how it breaks down of where the levy, where it's going. Once again, 25% of that is going towards debt. We've got 3.8 million kind of allocated towards that. Once again, that's why that remains kind of an important function and feature of continuing to pay down debt. Most of our revenue comes from property taxes. That's the vast majority. That's typical of most municipalities. That's how the state is set up, it's a property tax heavy state. So this is a pretty typical graph that you would see elsewhere too. Let's do it that way. So just looking at other non-property tax revenue streams, we have state shared revenue that went up $22,000. We had the personal property state aid from the first personal property state aid that went up $1,600. Highway aids went up $24,000. That's one that at some point is probably going to start decreasing. So that's based upon what we spend on new road projects. A lot of that is being calculated from the County Highway M project from years ago. At some point that will probably start dropping down. We anticipate that's going to happen in the coming years. Other revenue sources, interest on investments, we didn't make any adjustments from the previous year, so we're still not sure what that account is really doing. We've gotten some guidance from our investment advisors, but we kind of kept that status quo just to be safe for this budget. Building permit fees, we're projecting a $42,000 increase just in fees based upon projects that we believe will be coming forward. The development side and building side has gotten strange. Single family has slowed drastically. Apartments are still booming, and non-residential still continues to do okay. But single family has dropped significantly in the last couple months, and that's because of interest rates going up to 7%, and after the rate hike today, maybe 7.5%, 8%, so who knows. So we have seen a significant slowing in the single family side. Fines and forfeitures from the courts, they're projecting a $40,000 increase from next year. We have additional revenue projected from the rec department. This is mainly because of the beach and the playground program. We have great numbers in our playground program. And then our hotel room tax collection, we just kept that status quo just because we've seen some better numbers, but we just don't have certainty of where those numbers are really going. So looking at expenditures, Vast majority of our budget goes towards public safety. That's a typical budget for most communities. Next big one is going to be public works. Those are typically the two biggest kind of expenditures from a department standpoint. Once again, very typical, very common for most cities. So this is an incomplete chart. We typically have on here what our estimated kind of mill rate is for the city. We don't have our final numbers yet from the state. Part of that is due to the fact this meeting is being held a little bit earlier than we normally do just because of the elections. But we also had a manufacturer appeal to the state, their assessment. One of the companies here in town made an appeal to the state that I think that ruling came out I think late last week. So we hope to have this number finalized by November 14th. We do anticipate, and once again, we on our blank sheet here, but we do anticipate that our mill rate's going to go down. That does not necessarily mean that taxes are going to go down. Once again, we had a reval last year. As part of that, there is a shift of kind of that property tax burden because of Epic. Epic accounts for about $1 billion of our value here, which is about, give or take, a third. So if they're only going up 1 or 2% in their value, but a typical home is going up 20%, you're going to have a shift as part of that just because of the valuation. So we anticipate this number to be going down, but just once again, I want to emphasize that doesn't necessarily mean that taxes are going down for a typical homeowner. Other factor as well is the school district referendum. Ultimately, that will have some play and factor in this as well too. So, budget again, looking at personnel changes that are currently in the draft budget. The senior center, there's currently an administrative assistant there as part of the budget process. They're looking at increasing that to a full-time position. Right now it's a 55% position. It would become a full-time position. The library is making some adjustments as part of theirs. They're moving some positions from 40 to 50% and then eliminating 2 of the page positions. Those page positions have been challenging to fill. So the thought process is they would up the percentages of the positions that have been easier to fill. The fire department will eliminate their administrative assistant, which is a part-time position. That position is currently vacant. And as part of that, some of those funds will be rolled into a full-time battalion chief. The fire chief had requested kind of 2 positions as part of the budget, so this is one of the positions that was funded. He was also looking at an additional firefighter as well as part of this budget cycle. Also making some adjustments to kind of some pay grades for the parks positions. Those are the maintenance positions. We moved those from a grade 9 to 10. The intent of that is to put them on par with the public works employees. We went through and rescored those positions, and we believe it should be at the grade 10. And then once again, making an adjustment to the accounting assistant in the administration department, moving that position from a grade 7 to grade 8. That's one of those we rescored that one again. It's also parity with other similar position in a different department. Any questions so far?
I have one.
Okay.
Why the increase in fines and forfeitures? Because that's a significant percentage.
Been going up like that drastically, and they are finally making it match what actual revenues we're getting in.
Okay, so it's a more, because my understanding is, I know in the past Chief Coughlin would underestimate it a little bit because he didn't want pressure on the police department.
Well, this is actually through the courts.
The courts, okay,
So if you look at the municipal court, you'll see it in their budget.
okay, thanks. Other questions? Seeing none?
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So looking at capital, what are we funding for capital? So police department's looking at some new tables and chairs for $23,000. Parks looking at some updated soccer goals. Veteran Park ball field, if you look outside the window, there's a dugout shelter that needs I think it's a new roof on there. And then also looking at some potential improvements along Badger Mill Creek related to the prairie and the restoration efforts in that area. Fire department has portable radio replacements, and then the SCBA equipment replacement, which I don't recall what that was. Air packs, okay, yeah, I lose track of some of that equipment. So that would be funded with levy. And then looking at these revolving funds again, we're going to look at putting $340,000 into parks and public works for the equipment replacement. 189 in the public safety equipment replacement, 115 to EMS. That's for, we continually kind of budget for future ambulances because they're on I think every other year cycle replacing the ambulances. And then facility replacements again is $100,000. Once again, those are the accounts that we kind of draw money from when there's equipment purchases. Those accounts we're spending more than we're putting into those. So we do know that's one of the constraints coming up here, is that we do know that we're not putting enough money in there to fund what we know is coming as well. So we've started projecting out when those will run out of money. It's not tomorrow, but it's looking out 5 to 10 years. Those accounts are going to be dwindling. So we're trying to put as much money back into those accounts as part of this project, process, and every budget going forward, just to try to get those built up so we can avoid borrowing when we buy pieces of equipment. So revolving funds, this is kind of the things that we're buying with it. So Public Works has a new patrol truck. That's one of those big, basic plow trucks you see in the winter. The service vehicle, that's just a truck. They have an older truck that we'll be replacing as part of it. And then also some trailers as well. Parks has 2 mowers in here. Our mowers have been breaking, seems like weekly for the Parks Department. So we're looking at replacing 2 of those that would hopefully not break every other week. Police is looking at 2 additional patrol vehicles and a variety of equipment as well. The library has carpeting and roof replacement, and then also looking at the city's portion of the ambulance for Fitch-Rona. But once again, this is coming out of the revolving fund, so these are the savings account funds that we have that help reduce our borrowing costs. Other requests from a capital standpoint we have in here, pavement rehab, we have $440,000. That's from a fund balance carried over from the previous year. Sidewalk as well, once again, fund balance. We do have the sidewalk on North Nine Mound for $60,000. That'd be in front of the UW Clinic. Street improvements on Mark and Eastview, those are kind of continually ongoing funding of that. Those are items that will be reconstructed in the future, and we're just in the process of each year we put some money towards it. And then we have the plow for the truck. There's a plow that needs to be bought as well for one of the trucks in Public Works. Parks, cameras, the tree program, once again, the shelter behind City Hall here. And then we'd have some revenue also from the selling of Engine 2, which is a fire truck that we would replace next year. Borrowing for next year, we're looking at about $2.5 million of borrowing, of which there'd be about $577,000 for the path behind City Hall here. We have the design work for the Military Ridge State Trail paving. That's $125,000. Our goal is to bring that agreement back to the council before the year is out. We continue to work with the DNR on that. There's a path along North Main that needs to be replaced. And then we're also looking at some intersection improvements with some signals or cabinet work to hopefully make Main and Verona function better, especially at those peak hours. That's a TIF expense. That'd be $95,000. We have right now penciled in about $800,000 for the Century School Park, which is the park that Steve Brown Apartments will be building next year. And then we have that fire engine 2 replacement at $856,000. So total about $2.5 million, of which about 1.6 would be repaid with levy. So we're borrowing, but I'd say this is a drastically lower number than what we've done in some years past. Just kind of looking at our debt service for 2023, total we'll have about $6.1 million in payments. Those are spread out, as you can see below there. We also use impact fees, fire impact fees as well, library impact fees to help kind of cover that as well. That's where some of that money comes from to help pay for some of those debt in those areas. But it does break out to the TIF districts and the utilities as well. So right now we've got about $38 million in outstanding debt. By city policy, we could have up to $136 million. By state law, we could have up to $181 million. So we are well below what we're allowed by our policy and also by the state. Once again, this is kind of summarizes the top line is showing how much debt we could take on, and the bottom line is showing kind of what we have for debt. I think the one to focus on is that bottom line. We can also look at it this way too. It's going in the right direction. It's going down. It's not going up, it's going down. Once again, that means our debt payments are dropping. And when they drop, that does open up additional opportunities when those payments drop off that we can spend that money not paying back debt. We can spend it on whether it be new positions, whether it be whatever it might be. Fund balance, we do have a hefty fund balance within our policy. Right now, we've got about, in the 23 budget, we've got about 36% allocated for that. Our target range is 25 to 35%. So these are rainy day funds that if the economy tomorrow kind of just stopped and shut off or something drastic happened, these are funds that we have available to potentially draw upon. They are intended for the kind of worst case rainy day if something comes up. This does help us when we carry a fund balance like this. It does help us when we do have to borrow. It helps us get a better rating through the credit agencies as well. They like to see this, that we have the kind of, no different than yourself personally. If you walk in, you have savings behind you, that it's viewed better versus if you have nothing. So that's 23. Part of that, as we look at 23, there are constraints that we know are going to be coming in 24. One of which is going to be the library minimum funding. This was brought up in finance, that there was a mistake by the county when they calculated our minimum funding for this year. We actually should have had about $200,000 more, should have been going towards the library operating for this budget cycle. So that is an item that will be applied to us next year, plus whatever we have an additional, equalized value as part of the construction or the process. So we already know we're looking at potential $200,000 kind of budget hole for next year. We are talking with the county about how we can kind of budget, for library items, whether it be from the capital side, whether it be from services, but just how we can get additional flexibility and how that's used, because additional $200,000 for us, this budget for this year would have looked drastically different. You wouldn't have seen any of the positions in there. I don't know if you would have seen a 3% COLA in there as well either. So we're working, Brian, myself, and I think Middleton's going to get involved too now. They have similar concerns, but it's an item we're working through with Stacy, the library, then also Dane County, but trying to get a grasp on how we can get some flexibility. And the challenge we run into is, quite honestly, we're a community of 14,000, 15,000 people, but we have $3.5 billion in value. Epic's great, but they account for about $1 billion in value. If we took Epic off this, we'd probably be okay. But the fact that we have such a large tax base that's allocated towards non-residential, about half our tax base is not residential. It's commercial, as it's called. So that's the challenge. We're not a typical community when you look at that because of Epic. So the formula works in Wanakee and elsewhere, but when you apply it here, it makes it different because what we spend per person in Verona on the library versus anywhere else is by far a lot more, just because of how the funding formula has been set up with Dane County. So bottom line is we're working with Dane County. We're trying to get clarity on how the funds can be allocated and spent, but that's a big item that for next year that we're aware of and we're trying to get better certainty on. EMS funding, once again, we're tied back to equalized value, so as our values go up, we're going to potentially pay more. It's also dependent on Fitchburg as well, but we typically see a typical increase of $70,000, $50,000 to $70,000 at least each year as part of that budget. So that does kind of factor in as well. We'll also have our first payment to ICE Inc., potentially for $50,000 next year, so that's another item on the radar. We do have other departments that are looking at additional positions. The police department will be looking at an additional position. Part of that is going to be just because of the body-worn cameras. There's a lot of open records items with that, and a lot of data items with that, so they'll be looking at a position. Public Works, they looked at a position for this year. It wasn't included in the budget, but they'll be back again looking at one for next year. Fire, once again, the battalion chief is in this current budget. He's indicated that he would have liked to hire an additional firefighter for this budget as well too, so he'll be requesting an additional position. And then parks, we keep planting more trees, and I think part of the needs in park is going to come down to more of an arborist or forestry type position, but they have additional needs as well that have been identified. That was something Pat had identified before he left the city. And then ultimately, as I mentioned, depletion of replacement funds, those goes back to that revolving fund with kind of for the vehicles. That's the fund it's depleting, that we can keep putting money into it, but it does keep going down. So that's just a continued strain on the budget. So the timeline, we're here tonight. Budget amendments, I'll have a form, I'll show you in 2 seconds, that those amendments would be due by November 9th at 9 a.m. The form is the same form that we've had in previous years. We've got the council meeting on November 14th. That meeting's at 7 p.m. We'll have action on any budget amendments if necessary, and then we'll act on the budget and levy. The form itself, like I said, same as last couple of years. It's got a budget area, it's got a description, dollar amount of what the amendment is, and then we would also need to also know the effects if it's ongoing or one time. And then we would just need some kind of details of where those dollars are coming from as well. Part of this process, if you propose amendment, you also need to identify where those funds would be coming from. And I talked fast, but it's almost 6 o'clock, and that's what I have. Any questions?
Any questions from the council? Alder Cronin.
Just a question around the mowers. Is Parks looking at ways that we could potentially reduce, and no surprise this is coming from me, mowing by planting in medians, mowing less in public parks, things like that? That might reduce the impact on these pretty expensive mowers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm not exactly sure what they've looked at, if that's been an option. I think ultimately that direction could come from the council, the park board as well, too. You know, some of these areas, these things take a beating just because of the uneven terrain. I mean, we're talking, I think, some drive shafts and these things that we're breaking, and some of these as well we also use in the winter, too. Some of them do get used for plowing of snow as well, but I think, you know, I think any of those options are on the table. I think part of what we're looking at is trying to get, you know, we've got mostly John Deere's right now. I think they're looking at more of a typical, you know, John Deere's fine, but looking at maybe a company that just kind of does mowers versus, either way, you know, regardless of which direction we go, we've got enough down there that just, like I said, they break. They're in the shop more often than they're out actually cutting. So I think, you know, big picture wise, I think that's still, you know, on the table. But I think it's more of the a couple of these are just, I don't want to say garbage, but some of these are just they're well past their life span and they need to go.
Other questions? Seeing none, anything to add, Mr. Sayer, Mr. Lamers?
So after the meeting, I'll send out the budget amendment form. If you have questions, let Brian and myself know. But I'll get that out probably even before I head out tonight.
Excellent. With that, we'll move on to item 6, which is adjournment. Motion by Alder Touche. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Ricky. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are adjourned at 5:58. Thank you.